I want to talk about community today and how can we find real community. And I know that this is an important topic, and I know it's a topic that many of us struggle with because almost every single week I will talk to somebody who will say something along the lines of, I've lived in San Francisco for X amount of years and I still can't find my people. I still can't find community. And I meet people each and every week as well who are trying to find their community in a place like this, in a church, and they've gone to church after church after church after church, and they still say after years of searching, I cannot find my community. So chances are all of us at some point, maybe even now, you're going, how in the world do I find real community in San Francisco? Actually, I would just venture, I'll just put it out there. Anybody, just raise a hand if you find it, maybe have had a hard time at some point in time finding community here in San Francisco. If that's you, go and raise your hand. Yeah, okay. See, most of us. I did that because I want all of you to know maybe it's not you. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not you. Maybe actually finding community in San Francisco for whatever reason is kind of difficult. And so I think this message, I hope at least, will be beneficial to you. Now, sometimes in a talk that I prepare, it'll end up being what I would call just like this really pragmatic, practical talk where I'll give you kind of a vision and then some practical steps. Here's how to now activate that vision, turn it into a reality. And there's that version of talks. And then there's other version of talks where it's not so much me standing up here saying, well, here's what you should do, A, B, and C, 1, 2, 3, do these things, as much as it's me giving a vision of what life could look like, of what community could look like, and hopefully reigniting or stirring up a new vision that you hadn't had before. And it's not so much me saying, here's how you go do it, but more so me just saying, this is what your life could look like. And that looks different for all of us, but it's a vision worth pursuing. That is sort of what this teaching is today. If you're going to look for me giving you like 5 easy steps to find friends in San Francisco, like you're going to be a little disappointed. But what I do hope to do today is give you a new vision of what it means to find community and what that could look like for you. And my hope today is that you will be so stirred up for what I talk about today that you're going to realize not only that you should do this, but you're like, I must do this because my very livelihood actually depends on my ability to do this. So I want to talk about how do we find real community today. In fact, I want to maybe change the language a little bit because as I prepared for today's talk, and whenever I prepare for a talk, I look to the Bible, I see what the scriptures has to say about it, but I also, what is culture saying about it? What are psychologists saying about this? What are sociologists saying about this? What are authors saying about this? Theologians saying about this? I kind of look to everybody to sort of say, hey, what are other people feeling, thinking, and saying when it comes to a particular topic? And so I did that with the topic of community. And what I found to be really, really interesting as I studied and prepared for today is that really community isn't so much the main problem. It's the language we use, but it's not really the source of our problem and our struggle in finding real community. See, because I think some of us, we think community is all about, just having a bunch of people in your life. Maybe even having friends. If I have friends, I have community. But who here knows you could have friends and not really have community? And who here knows you could be in a room full of people and not actually experience community? Maybe even some of you, you have large groups of friends, but really it's all pretty much skin deep. It never really goes anywhere that authentic, that meaningful, that deep, or that challenging. Maybe some of you can relate to that. In fact, those people that I meet that say, hey, I've gone to this church and this church and this church, and I just can't find community. It's not like they went to these churches and there were no other human beings there. It was a room full of people, maybe even similar to this. So what is it that was missing? If people don't always equal community, then what does lead to community? And what I found through all the different opinions and studies and sources that I looked into is at the end of the day, people don't always equal community, but connection will always lead to community. That when people say, I can't find community, what they're really saying is, I'm not experiencing a real connection with the people that I'm around. I'm not experiencing a deep connection in my conversations, a deep connection with others in my small group. I'm not experiencing a deep connection. So I think if you want community, we actually got to first and foremost talk about connection. And what does it actually mean to experience human connection? And why is it so important, not only for your relationships, you thought maybe it was just for your social life, but actually why it is vital for your spiritual life as well. The human connection. How do we experience that? Now, let's define what connection even means. Here's how I would define connection. Real human connection, we can put it on the screen, is when you are in a relationship where you are fully seen and fully safe. How do you experience real human connection? I think it's as simple as this. When two or more people are together and in that relationship, they are fully seen, no mask, no facades, no plastic, no filter. Their best and worst self is fully seen, and yet, even though they're fully seen, they are equally fully safe. Not only will you have connection if you experience both of those things, but if you only have one or the other, but not both, it will kill connection. If you are to experience connection, you need to be in a relationship where you feel fully seen and fully safe. And it's not only vital for your social life, but spiritual life. It's even vital for your emotional, mental, and physical life. In fact, Abraham Maslow, a psychologist, he posed this theory called the hierarchy of needs. And in his theory of hierarchy of needs, which he proposed in 1943, if you go Google it right now, you'll see sort of this pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid are like the basic elements that we need for survival as humans. Food, water, shelter, safety, right? We need these just to survive in the world. The question is, what is next after those things for us as humans to survive in the world? And according to Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, it's not maybe what you would think it is. I think in today's world, we might go I need identity. I need purpose. I need to succeed. I need wealth. Just above food, water, shelter, and safety, I need identity, purpose, wealth. I need those things. But those fall number 3 or 4 down the list. You know what comes right after food, water, shelter, and safety for a person to survive in the world? Love and belonging. Love and belonging. This sense that you're fully seen and fully safe in the world. And he ranks this just above food, water, shelter, and clothing and safety. Which is interesting because it means one of the things that we need the most to thrive as a human being, one of the things we need the most, for many of you in this room who just raised your hand, it is the thing you have the least of. Real human connection. It is dependent on love and belonging. Isn't that annoying though? I don't know about you. I wish I could thrive in my life without people. How about you? I wish that I could be happy and whole and experience peace and joy and it not be contingent on other people. That would be so much easier because people are complicated. Can I get an amen? People are messy. People make life difficult. I mean, not you, of course, you're awesome, but everybody else, they make your life so difficult. It would just be awesome if you could experience the wholeness and health and happiness without needing other people. I've heard somebody say this before. Hopefully it's not too offensive, but I think it's true. It's this phrase that people are your greatest asset in your life, but people are also your greatest pain in your asset in your life. You know what I'm talking about? It's absolutely true. People will make you laugh, and people will make you cry. People will be the reason that you love, and people will be the reason that you're afraid to love. People will be the reason you open up your heart, and people will be the very reason that you close up your heart and keep everyone at a distance. People will champion you, and people will crush you. People will be the source of your greatest joys in life, and likely they will be the source of your greatest hurts in your life. Every time I ask people, what's the greatest hurt you ever experienced? It always goes back to a person. People, they're messy, they're complex, and yet we need them in our lives to be whole, happy, and healthy. And to understand our need for human connection, it turns out that this ancient poem in the first couple chapters of the first book of the Bible in Genesis tells us a whole lot about our need for human connection. And most of the time when we read the story of creation, we don't read it as an explanation of what it means to be human, but read it through that lens that Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 especially are telling us the complex story of what it means to be human in the world. And so to understand our need for human connection, we got to go back to the very beginning. You got to go back to the Garden of Eden before the fall. What is the fall? The fall is that moment where Adam and Eve blew it for the rest of us, right? They blew it for the rest of us, and the world was never the same again. It was that moment that Adam and Eve rebelled against God, that they lost paradise, and humanity has ever since been trying to get back to paradise. I mean, we see human nature's longing for paradise every time we take a vacation. I mean, just the word vacation itself echoes our longing for paradise. Where does the word vacation come from? It comes from the word vacate. So what is a vacation? We vacate the life we have so that momentarily we could have the life we wish we had. All right, and where do we go to experience paradise? Some of us, we go to the mountains. Any mountain people in the room? You're just like, that's where you feel Jesus in the mountains, you know. It's peaceful there. If you're anything like me, then it's the ocean. Anybody, you're ocean people? Yeah, that's me all day. I can stand in front of an ocean. I can be in the water all day because it's just transcendent. It feels like a taste of paradise. And if you can't vacate life and go to paradise, then you go to Disneyland, which is the illusion of paradise. But we see this like longing in our souls to experience paradise because we were created for it. But here's the question that I think has profound implications in your theology, what you think about God, and it also has profound implications on your anthropology, what you think about humans and what it means to be human. And that question that has implications on your theology and anthropology is this question about Adam in Genesis 1. When Adam was in Eden, before the fall, before sin entered the picture, did Adam have any needs? When Adam was in the Garden of Eden before the fall, in the presence of God, did Adam have any needs? The answer you give to that question has profound implications on your theology and anthropology. See, I think many of us, we would actually say before the fall, Adam had no needs. Why would he have needs? He's in paradise. It's perfect. There's no crime, there's no violence, there's no racism, sexism, ageism, or any other ism that crushes people. There were no empires, there were no politics, there was no wildfires, there was no earthquakes, there was no tornadoes, there was nothing. It was perfect paradise. And not only was it perfect, but he was in the presence of God. He had an actual, tangible talk to God, and God talks to you relationship with the divine. Did God have, or did Adam have any needs? And the answer to that question for many people is where our misunderstanding begins to inform what we believe about God, ourselves, and what it means to be fully human. Because in many churches, it's taught that if you just had God in your life, you wouldn't have any other needs in your life. But the problem with this is if you have actually been following God with your life, then you know it's not true. This notion that if you just have God, you'll have everything that you'll ever need. There are worship songs that sing this. God, you're all that I need. God, you are all that I want. And we know it's not fully true, right? Because you say, God, you are all that I want. But you know, sometimes I want Taco Bell too. God, you are all that I need. You're all I ever need. But you know what? I also need money to pay rent in San Francisco. I can't call my landlord and be like, hey, I can't pay rent today, but you know what I do got a lot of? The love for the Lord. They're not going to accept that currency. I call this romantic truth. What is romantic truth? Romantic truth is the things you say that you mean that you don't actually mean. Romantic truth is the things you say you mean when you don't actually mean it. Like when you tell someone that you love them with all your heart. Really? There's not even a small part of your heart that loves something else? Or I see this because I do a lot of weddings. I see couples, they'll stand up on their wedding day at the altar and they're like, I will never hurt you. Yeah, let's talk in a year. You probably will. You see, we say these things that are romantic truth that sound nice and we think we mean it, but we don't really mean it. And for some of you, saying this out loud might feel freeing. Because you're like, I do love God, but I also love a lot of other things. I always felt like maybe bad about loving other things. Maybe I need to love God more because like I say I need God, but you know, I actually do need some other things. So maybe for some of you, you hear this and it sounds freeing. For others of you, it's offensive. You're getting a little uncomfortable. It's not only offensive, it's like offensive with a dash of heresy. Like, what are you saying that, Travis, are you really telling me that God is not all that I should want and all that I need? How in the world did you get your job, Travis? In fact, I am telling you this. And by the way, God said it first. And that's where we have to continue in the Genesis story. Because in Genesis chapter 1, God creates everything. And there's this rhythm and there's this cadence in the poem there in Genesis chapter 1 where God creates something and then God says, it is what? Good. He creates the universe and he says it's good. The sun and the moon, he says it's good. The land and the sea, and he says it's good. The animals that scurry on the ground and the animals that swim in the ocean, and he says it's good. He creates the mountains good, the stars good, the Golden State Warriors good, tacos good. Like he creates all these things and he says it is good. But then God gets to his greatest masterpiece, and he creates humans. And all of a sudden, the poem takes a little bit of a turn because instead of God saying that this is good for the first time, he actually says it's very good. He looks at humans and he says it's very, very good, which, by the way, this is just a little reminder that the first word God has about you is very good. It's very good. Now, I know it's sometimes popular in places like this to start in Genesis 3, where sin enters the human story, and then all of a sudden we're talking about how all people are sinful and all people are broken, and we pretend like sin is the first word about who you are. Can I tell you, sin is not the first word about who you are. Very good is the first word about who you are. And what's even better is that although sin is real, I'm not denying its reality in the human story and a part of the human dilemma. It is at best the middle word, but if you're a follower of Jesus, it's not the last word. The first word is that you're very good. The second word may be, yeah, you got some sin in your life, but the last word is you're victorious in Jesus Christ because the tomb is empty. So let's get that right, because a lot of churches talk about original human sin and we don't talk at all about original human goodness, which is why I think it's important to realize that everyone has some goodness in them. I refuse to believe otherwise. There's some people have it shoved down there really deep, right? But it's there. But back to our question. Did Adam, who was declared to be very good, placed in paradise in a perfect world with only God, did Adam need anything else? God seems to think so. In fact, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, here's where we see God say Adam doesn't have all that he needs. Genesis 2:18, God says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." Now you need to understand, that's not Adam saying it. Adam didn't go to God and say, God, you know what? Thanks for paradise. Thanks for letting me name all the animals. Hippopotamus, what a cool name for that one, right? But thanks for the cool responsibilities you've given me. Man, but I'm lonely, God. And God wasn't like, what? I gave you paradise and you're with me. I should be all that you need, Adam. That's not how this goes down. God actually tells Adam something that maybe even Adam didn't know yet, and that is that it's not good for him to be alone, even if he's alone with God. That he actually needs other people in his life to be fully human as God intended him to be. Right from the very beginning, we're shown that God did not create us to only need God, but God actually created us to need one another. I not only need God, I need you. And you not only need God, you need me and the other people around you. Turn to the person next to you and say, I need you. But don't be weird about it. I need you. Which is always why it's interesting. Sometimes, as a pastor, one of the questions people ask is, what do you do for a living? And I always get nervous when that question gets asked because everyone responds very differently. But I'll tell someone I'm a pastor, and sometimes they'll be like, man, I would totally maybe check out your church, but I just don't do the whole organized religion thing. I just don't do organized religion. I'm like, that's fantastic. We're super disorganized at Canvas, and we don't like religion at all. So I think you're really like it here. You should come check it out. But what I've noticed when a lot of people who say this, especially those who are like, I care about my faith, I just don't do organized religion. What they're saying is I can grow in my faith and live a fulfilled life without other people. Other people just get in the way. So I'm just going to do it all on my own. And while that might sound really spiritual, it's actually quite arrogant. To assume that you could walk all on your own and do what Adam couldn't even do in paradise, but you can do it in a broken world. No. We all need one another. We all need one another. And by the way, if you say you're connected to God, but you are not connected to others, I'll go a little bit further and just say, I'm not sure you're as connected to God as you think. If you're like, I'm connected to God, but you are not connected to others, then I wonder how connected to God you actually are. Why? Because when God calls you to him, he also calls you to one another. When God pulls you towards himself, he pulls you towards other people as well. In fact, this whole idea of like a personal relationship with God, which we talk about a lot in the church today, right? Like, it's not that it's not totally true, but just so you know, it's not in the Bible. Like, it's an extra biblical concept. Not necessarily wrong, but it was very much birthed out of Western individualism thinking. This idea of like, hey, it's just about the journey I'm on. But you go to the first century in the world of Jesus, the reason adoption was the metaphor for the early church was because it was this idea that when you get the Father in God, you get the family of God as well. That you're not only called to God, but you are called to one another. So if you went back 2,000 years ago to the early church and you're like, yeah, this church thing sounds nice, but I just have a personal relationship with the Lord. They'd be like, what's that? How's that working for you? Like, we have one another. We need one another. We long for community. We're created for this. But it's something we lose more and more as time goes by, it seems. In Genesis chapter 2, 21 through 22, we see the story continue in creation. It says, so the Lord caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while the man slept, the Lord God took out one of the man's ribs and he closed up the opening. Have you ever read that part of the story, or maybe you heard it? And have you ever wondered to yourself, why did God make Eve that way? Why put Adam to sleep? Why put him in a lazy boy, turn on the fishing channel, let him snooze, and then do open rib surgery, pluck out a rib, and make Eve from the rib of Adam? Why didn't God just do what he did for Adam, right? If you know, Adam in Hebrew means Adama, which means earth or dirt, because God took the dirt and he breathed into the dirt. So men in the room, you are a direct descendant of dirt, all right? So hope that makes you feel good about yourself. But God didn't do that with Eve, did he? He didn't go back and find a new pile of dirt and breathe into it and make Eve. Instead, he pulled Eve essentially out of Adam. And ever since, we've been pulling every person out of women since then. Why? Why did God decide to do it that way? Because I don't know about you, but I think there may be some better ways to bring humans into existence. I was there for the delivery of my child. And Jenna's not in the room, but I am sure that she would agree with me that if there was a different way to deliver a human into this world, she would have taken it. And yet, this is the methodology in which God has given us. And we all know it's just a really terrible way to enter the world. This is why when kids ask how babies are born, we're like, oh, storks. They drop because we don't want to traumatize the kid. They would have nightmares if they knew how it really went down. Why did God do it this way? There were so many different, why couldn't babies come through like bubbles? Wouldn't that be awesome? If two people, they're married and they're like, I want to have a child now. And as soon as they said that, like a little bubble popped up. And if you were like, I want a couple kids, it's like, and it starts just as a cute little bubble. Wouldn't that be awesome? If that little bubble followed you around everywhere you went, it just, hey, there's a little bubble. And then eventually, as months went by, that little bubble became a bigger bubble and a bigger bubble and a bigger bubble. And it'd be awesome. It would save me a lot of fear of ever asking, when you're due, because there'd be a bubble. I would know. And it would be incredible, right? Because after 9 months, the bubble just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then pop, and then you catch the baby, and then you just move on. I don't know about you. I need to talk to God about this. I think that would have been a much better idea, but that is not at all how God decided to do it. Instead, God decides to put a human inside of another human. And while it starts small and maybe innocent, it then proceeds to grow until it can kick your internal organs like soccer balls and push its hand on the outside of or inside of your stomach like a scene from Alien. And not only that, they begin to demand any food that they want. And it's usually the strangest concoctions. When Jenna was pregnant, she wanted peanut butter and pickle sandwiches all the time. And baby gets what baby wants. So she ate all the peanut butter pickle sandwiches that she could handle. And then in God's final act of dark or divine sense of humor, he makes the head of a child massive. that is supposed to fit through something not as massive. And then after that, this baby depends on you for its survival for the next 18 years. Unless you're a millennial, then it's even longer. All right, so, and here's my point. So you're like, dude, what is going on right now? I wonder if God designed birth. Here's the point. I wonder if God designed birth to happen this way because God wanted us to see every time a baby is born something fundamental about what it means to be a human being. That from the very origin of your life, you were created to be intimately connected to another human being. And from the very beginning, you were created to be connected intimately to another human being. And ever since the umbilical cord was cut, it's almost like we're all been on this journey to find that connection again. And this basic human need for connection is what's behind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's what's behind psychological theories like attachment theory, if you're familiar with that, which talks about how your caretaker took care of you affects so much about who you become as adults. That connection you had as a child determines so much about who you become when you grow older. And it's the very reason God looked at Adam, who had God, and realized that he needed God and he needed others. And perhaps this is why, when Jesus is asked, what is the most important question? What's the most important commandment, rather? He's asked the question, what is the most important commandment? Which, by the way, that's not like, you might hear that and go, oh, they're wondering what rules do I follow? But really the question underneath the question is, how do we live the life God intended us to live? So they ask, what's the greatest commandment? How do we live the life God intended us to live? And this would be the moment, don't you think, that if all that mattered was loving God, that Jesus would have just said that. He would have just said, hey, just love God. He's all you need after all. He's all you want. Don't worry about anything else. Just love God. But he doesn't do that, does he? If you're familiar, he goes, love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he says a second commandment that Jesus says is equally important to the first. And equally in Hebrew means equally. It means the same. He says what matters just as much as loving God, Jesus says, is loving others as you love yourself. How do we live the life that God intended us to live? Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, strength. And equally, love others as you love yourself. Because loving God alone isn't enough. We need God, and we need one another. We were created for connection, intimate connection with others. What does that even look like, though? Well, Genesis 2 continues and gives us a picture. In Genesis 2, it says this, now the man and his wife were both naked, but they felt no shame. I think sometimes we read this and we just think like, God brings Eve to Adam and Adam sees Eve, Eve sees Adam, they're both naked, and they're like, not bad. I think sometimes we think it's like they just didn't have embarrassment. But I need you to understand there's something much more meaningful about this than simply them being comfortable being in the nude with one another. What we're seeing here is a picture that nothing was hidden. Nothing was being put through a filter. They were standing in front of one another exactly as they are. No plastic. And in that moment, they felt completely safe. They were with one another and they were naked and they did not feel shame. Because what is shame? At the heart and soul of shame, it's not like, oh, I feel bad about something. No, that's regret. Shame is the fear. If someone knew the real you would be disconnected. If they knew what I thought, if they knew what I went through, if they knew what I did, if they knew what I struggled with, it's this idea that if I'm completely me, no filter, no plastic, nothing hidden, then they would no longer have a place to belong, which is why shame is so powerful in keeping people in places, isn't it? Because people want to belong most of all. And yet in this moment, they were completely themselves and they were completely safe. And this is a picture of what we were created for. But if you really think about it, that's pretty terrifying. Isn't it terrifying to think about someone knowing everything there is to know about you? Like, how terrifying would it be if everyone knew the thoughts you thought? How terrifying would it be if, as you were talking to someone, your internal thoughts were like right above your head and they could just read it? And so they're reading as you're talking, like, won't that guy just shut up? Like, no, that would be terrifying, right? For people to know the full, true, unfiltered, non-plastic version of you. And yet here in Genesis chapter 2, nothing is hidden. Vulnerability and safety were in perfect harmony. They were completely seen and they were completely safe. Which makes sense then when shame enters the story in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve rebel against God and sin. It says they saw their nakedness and for the first time they felt shame. And what did they do in response to their shame? They ran away and they hid. Humans haven't changed that much, have we? And when we feel shame, this idea that if they knew, fill in the blank, then I would no longer belong. So what do? We run and we hide. We put on the mask, we play the role, we say the line, we do the thing, because we think if they really saw us, we would no longer be safe. And as long as you live your life that way, you'll never experience human connection. Not the way that you were created to experience. You might experience maybe some companionship or some friendships, but connection at the deepest soul level, it can't happen until you're fully seen and also feel fully safe. And I want that in my relationships. How about you? Like, I want relationships where I can be fully me and feel fully safe. And I don't think there's a person in this room, even if we disagree about 100 things, we agree on the one thing here. Like, I want to be fully seen and I want to be fully safe. And the reason you want that is because you were created for that. The reason you want that is because your soul was created for that. The reason you want that is the same reason Adam needed it, because you can't be fully alive or fully human without that sort of connection. So the surprising news of Genesis 2 is that even in paradise and even with God alone, he was incomplete without human connection. And it turns out the one thing that would make Adam whole and human and fully alive wasn't things at all. It was God and it was people. And the same is true for us today. Like you may have the best job. You may make the most money. You may go on the most extravagant vacations. You may have all the Instagram pictures to prove it. But at the end of the day, you could have all of that and have nothing if you have no connection with others in your life. You could achieve fame and success and status, but without human connection, you risk being successful at all the things your soul needed the least, while missing the very thing your soul needed the most. Can you imagine what it would be like to be a part of a church where this sort of thing is normal? A church where when people are like, what's Canvas like? That is a community where I can be fully seen, and yet I feel fully safe. I don't know about you, I want to be a part of that church. How about you? I'm so over plastic Christianity. How about you? We're going to talk about how to have real faith next week, so be here for that. I'm so tired of facades and filters and Sunday school lines. Like, I just want to be a part of a community, and I bet you do too, where when you show up, you can show up as the real you, fully seen and be fully safe in return. And you know what? That's probably what you want in a group. When you join a group, to be fully seen and to be fully safe. And you know, we should strive for this. Like our very lives depend on it. Because they actually kind of do. That the life that you want to have depends on the connection with others that you can have. Now it makes sense why Jesus, in one of his final prayers, and if the band wants to come up, we're going to wrap up. Jesus, in one of his final prayers, in John 17:21, I don't know about you, but like I would pay attention to someone's final prayer because it probably says what they value most. Here's what Jesus says in one of his final prayers. He says, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you, and may they be in us so that the world will believe you sent me. I find it so interesting that the metaphor that Jesus uses and prays would be similar to our connection with one another is the connection that Jesus, the Father, and Holy Spirit have with one another. This harmonious relationship, this harmonious connection with one another. Jesus says, I pray that they would have that with one another. And Jesus even seems to believe that if we experience that sort of connection that reflects the harmonious connection the Trinity has, Jesus seemed to believe that the world, it makes God more believable to the world. I don't know about you, when I see people attacking one another, tearing one another apart, creating an unsafe world for people to be seen, it makes God harder to believe in. You know? But when we create a world where people can be fully seen and yet fully safe, I think in that world we begin to make God more visible to those who are watching. You know, which is why I've never met a person who left a church because of Jesus. Yeah, no one's been like, you know who's a jerk? That guy. No one. But I've met plenty of people, if not every person who's left a church, every person I've talked to that I tell them I'm a pastor, like, oh, they might even say I hate God, and I'll trace it back, and it's like, oh, no, you just hate the people who said they were representing God, and they did a really bad job. Yeah. So Campus, I'll wrap up with this. Campus, if we don't get connection with one another, right? If we can't be a community where you're fully seen as you are and fully safe, it doesn't matter how good our worship is. Doesn't even matter how good the sermons are, how cool our venue may or may not be, because we'll miss that which is most important. I get people talk about Campus and they're like, that's not a safe place to be seen. Then we make God more invisible to the world. But if we get this right, if we get human connection right as a church, and I can't build this on my own, we got to build this together, y'all. If we can be a community where every single person in this room that is here now and will ever be here in the future can come here just as they are and feel not only seen but safe, I believe Jesus' prayer will become a reality, that God will become more believable to San Francisco and to every person who walks through these doors. And I don't know about you, I want to be a church that makes God believable. I want to be a church that loves one another so well that it makes it hard to not believe in God. And it's really up to us. So will we be that church that cultivates human connection? And will you in your own life cultivate it as well? Because maybe for some of you, you're living your life like Genesis 1 right now. Genesis 1, Adam, I just me and God, it's all I need. I don't need other people. People are complicated. People are messy. I just need the Bible. I need a podcast, and I'm just going to live on my own. You're living like Genesis 1, Adam. And God's like, man, you are missing out. But then maybe some of you are living like Genesis 3, Adam and Eve. And you're living your life running and hiding because shame has convinced you that you do not belong. And maybe today God is saying, you've always belonged. You can come just as you are and be fully safe.